Welcome back to Simplified on PowerDrift. We're starting a brand new series where we'll be covering topics about Formula One. Now this first video and a couple of videos after this are going to be covering the basics about Formula One. So if you know someone who's just starting to show interest in Formula One, this is for them. Or if you are starting to show interest in Formula One, this is perfect for you. Now in this first video, we'll be talking about what is Formula One. Formula One in essence is a form of motorsport. So cars racing around a racetrack for a set number of laps. That's it. That's the basics. Now Formula One is also referred to as the pinnacle of motorsport, and that is for a very good reason. It's because Formula One tends to have the pinnacle of everything. They have the highest budgets per team, they have the most cutting edge technology, they tend to have the best drivers and the best racetracks as well. That's why it's called the pinnacle of motorsport, because it usually sits at the top in pretty much every category. Now the cars that Formula One uses are called open-wheeled single-seater cars. They're called open-wheeled because there's nothing covering the wheel arches, and they're called single-seaters because there's only place for one driver. Now the cars they run are built around a very tight set of guidelines in terms of the engine, in terms of the bodywork, and pretty much every other aspect of the car is tightly regulated to keep them fairly similar from one car to the other, which is why you see a sort of standard shape across all cars in a grid. Now there are some differences across each car, and that's where the teams shine. They find loopholes in the regulations and exploit those loopholes for better performance. Now right now there are 10 teams on the grid. Each team has 2 drivers and 2 cars, so there are basically 20 drivers on the grid. Now how a typical race weekend goes is that you have 2 practice sessions on Friday, that's followed by another third or final practice session on Saturday, and then you have qualifying. In qualifying, drivers drive around the track and they set the fastest times possible to set the grid for Sunday's race. Now in total there are 23 races scheduled for the 2023 season, and each race lasts about 90 minutes. Some are longer and some are slightly shorter as well. Now how race length is decided is actually based on distance. So there is a minimum distance of 305 kilometers, and that is divided by the length of the racetrack to get your number of laps. So for example, if you have a 5-kilometer long circuit, you would divide 305 by 5 and you would get 61 laps. If, for example, that division ends up in 61.5, it would be rounded up to 62 laps. Now there is an exception here, and that is sprint race weekends. Now these have been recently introduced, and these are basically like having a T20 match in the middle of an ODI. So what happens is that you give up a couple of practice sessions in exchange for a small exciting race. So on Friday you have a qualifying. That qualifying is setting the grid for the race on Sunday, the full normal proper race. On Saturday morning, you have a sprint shootout or a sprint qualifying. That is to set the grid for a sprint race that happens later in the day, same on Saturday. Now the sprint race is slightly shorter in distance. It's about 100 kilometers, so 1/3 the race distance. And it usually means that because it's a shorter format, drivers tend to go all out and you see slightly more exciting action on a sprint race weekend. Not all races are sprint race weekends. There are only 6 for the 2023 season. At the end of each race, sprint or not sprint, the driver gets points. You will see the points break up on your screen right now, but what's important to remember is that basically there is a driver's championship and there is a constructor's championship. The constructor's points, or the team's points, the people who construct the car, is calculated by taking the total of both the drivers' points. So for example, if Max Verstappen has 300 points and Sergio Perez has 0 points, Red Bull is at 300 points. Ferrari, if they have 200 for Leclerc, 200 for Sainz, they would have 400 points and they would be leading the Constructors' Championship without leading the Drivers' Championship. That can happen, and we've seen it happen in the past. Okay, now that you know pretty much everything there is to know about Formula One, the question is, why does F1 exist? Now F1 basically exists because people on a little blue planet in the middle of the universe like to see very expensive cars race around a racetrack. That's basically it. Formula One is just another form of motorsport, and it evolved from people just being interested in racing. Over time, budgets increased, the seriousness of the sport increased, and a tight set of rules came into play that was also called the formula, and hence Formula One came into the picture. It was for the fans. Today, Formula One is more than just for the fans. It's also a way for teams to show off their engineering skills. I mean, if Mercedes can win 8 World Drivers' Championships in a row, they can surely make a nice C-Class, right? Formula One also serves as a way for technology testing and also as a way for technology transfer. So DOHC, or dual overhead camshafts, that have just debuted on the new Hero Charisma, that is a Formula One technology. It's the same for steering wheel buttons, I feel. Because Formula One cars have a lot of controls on them and the driver has to do a lot of those controls, steering wheels on Formula One cars are filled with buttons, and we're seeing some of that happen today. Actually, even KERS, or Kinetic Energy Recovery System, is a Formula One technology from back in the day, and that's what's known as regen on your cars today. And that's it. That's all the basics about Formula One. You know what they drive, you know where they drive, you know how long they drive for, and pretty much everything else around Formula One. We're going to be covering a whole host of more topics, so let us know in the comments below what you'd like to see. And thank you for watching Simplified.